Welcome back, everyone, to another installment of Morning Jim Poetry. The awful war in the Mideast is still going on, and oddly, in my mind, a small but vocal group of people are protesting in the usual places where it does no good. In New York City and San Francisco, and even though Hamas started the war with brutal attacks on Israeli civilians, now Israel is getting most of the heat. I think there's some hidden money bringing people from all over the country to these cities I mentioned, but our inadequate press corps hasn't told us who they are. It is so ironic that in spite of every conceivable kind of communication now available, the internet, TV, radio, and computer networks, public information is so limited and so one-sided and doesn't really tell us what we'd like to know the most. But perhaps that is what poetry is for. To delve into the depths of life and war and let the truth in some form escape. So today I'm going to read some poems from World War II and from other wars between then and now, starting with the following. And this is a poem by William Meredith called Reading My Poems from World War II. The ships in these verses course through a blue meadow. Like hounds, the oceans appear to be parks comprising whole sections of a pretty globe. Airplanes, like shoals of tropical fish, swim in a thin upper sea, and cloud swirls show how the globe spins, with a moon for pale lieutenant on her path through the ranks of night. If you look at the land masses closely, how carefully the mountains and landscapes are drawn. Some are like pictures of the Alps in old tapestries. You can almost make out the elephants. Others are green with feathery fronds. One is a volcano aglow, a pink cone like the breast of a goddess. The seamen and the flyers in these poems ride their craft like so many buffalo bills. It is a pleasure to watch even the clumsy ones spinning earthward like sparks, or circling like water bugs on the cold night sea, out of control, low in the water, or going under the water, bubbling like turtles. In one of the poems, the young poet himself kneels in the foreground, dressed as a lieutenant. He wears the insignia with pride. Nevertheless, you feel there is something wrong. He is rendered with all the compassion Velasquez reserved for his dwarfs. So that's Reading My Poems from World War II by William Meredith. Meredith's poem, for the most part, is self-explanatory. After the war was over, he became a typical academic poet of his era. How long his work will remain popular is another question, but I found that poem quite in keeping with the mood of World War II, where I grew up. Now, next we have a poem by another poet who actually spent some time in uniform in the Pacific Theater during World War II, but he had mainly office jobs, and his name is Carl Shapiro. He became quite a famous poet and writer on other subjects after the war was over. And this poem is called The Conscientious Objector. The gates clanged and they walked you into jail, more tense than felons, but relieved to find the hostile world shut out. The flags that dripped from every mother's window pane, obscene the bloodlust, sweating from the public heart. The dog authority slavering at your throat. A sense of quiet, of pulling down the blind possessed you. Punishment you felt was clean. The decks, the catwalks, and the narrow light composed a ship. This was a mutinous crew troubling the captains for plain decencies. A Mayflower brim with pilgrims headed out to establish new theocracies to west. A Noah's Ark coasting the topmost seas, 10 miles above the sodomites and fish. These inmates loved the only living doves. Like all men hunted from the world, you made a good community, voyaging the storm to no safe Plymouth or green Arafat. Trouble or calm, the men with Bibles prayed, the gaunt politicals construed our hate. The opposite of all armies, you were best opposing uniformity in yourselves. Prison and personality were your fate. You suffered not so physically, but knew maltreatment, hunger, ennui of the mind. Well might the soldier kissing the hot beach, erupting in his face, damn all your kind, you who saved neither yourselves nor us. So that's the poem, The Conscientious Objector, by Carl Shapiro. He had mixed feelings about that, but he was not a conscientious objector himself. He became a Pulitzer Prize winner in 1944 after publishing his poems written during the war, poems which would not have been published if he would have been in jail with The Conscientious Objector. But he didn't write about frontline subjects like Wilfred Owen did in the Great War. Now I want to read a poem by a Jewish woman poet, a very famous and good one, whose name is Adrienne Rich. This is a long poem, and I'm going to read mostly excerpts from it. I think you're going to get the full story of the poem, but not quite as much of it. Yom Kippur, 1984, by Adrienne Rich. And the epigram says, I drew solitude over me on the long shore, from Robinson Jeffers' Prelude. What is a Jew in solitude? What would it mean not to feel lonely or afraid, far from your own or those you have called your own? What is a woman in solitude? In the empty street, on the empty beach, in the desert? What in this world as it is can solitude mean? The glassy concrete octagon, suspended from the cliffs with its electric gates, its perfected privacy, is not what I mean. The pickup with a gun parked at a turnout in Utah, or the Golden Heights, is not what I mean. The Poet's Tower facing the Western Ocean, acres of forest planted to the east, the woman reading in the cabin, her attack dog suddenly risen, is not what I mean. 3,000 miles from what I once called home, I open a book searching for some lines I remember about flowers, something to bind me to this coast as lilacs in the dooryard once bound me back there. Yes, lupins on a burnt mountainside, something that bloomed and faded and was written down in the poet's book forever. Opening the poet's book, I find the hatred in the poet's heart. The hateful-eyed and human-bodied are all about me. You that love multitude may have them. Find someone like yourself. Find others. Agree you will never desert each other. Understand that any rift among you means power to those who want to do you in. Close to the center, safety. Toward the edges, danger. But I have a nightmare to tell. I am trying to say that to be with my people is my dearest wish, but that I also love strangers. I also crave separateness. I hear myself stuttering these words to my worst friends and my best enemies, who watch for my mistakes in grammar, my mistakes in love. This is the day of atonement. But do my people forgive me? If a cloud knew loneliness and fear, I would be that cloud. To love the stranger, to love solitude. Am I writing merely about privilege, about drifting from the center, drawn to the edges? A privilege we can't afford in a world that is who are hated as being of our kind. Where a woman is dragged from her stalled car into the mist-struck mountains, used and hacked to death. Young scholar shot at the university gates on a summer evening walk, his prizes and studies nothing availing his blackness. Jew, deluded that she's escaped the tribe, the laws of her exclusion. The men too holy to touch her hand. Jew, who has turned her back on midrash and mitzvah, yet wears the chai on a thong between her breasts. Hiking alone, found with a swastika carved in her back at the foot of the cliffs. And I ask myself, have I thrown courage away? Have I traded off something I don't name? To what extreme will I go to meet the extremist? What will I do to defend my want, or anyone's want, to search for her spirit vision, far from the protection of those she has called her own? Will I find, oh, solitude, your plumes, your breasts, your hair, against my face as in childhood, your voice, like a mockingbird singing, yes, you are loved, why else this song? In the old places, anywhere, what is a Jew in solitude? What is a woman in solitude? When the winter flood tides wrench the tower from the rock, crumble the prophet's headland, and the farms slide into the sea, when Leviathan is endangered and Jonah becomes revenger, when center and edges are crushed together, the extremities crushed together on which the world was founded, when our souls crash together, Arab and Jew, howling our loneliness within the tribes, when the refugee child and the exile's child reopen the blasted and forbidden city. In that world as it may be, newborn and haunted, What will solitude mean? That poem was written in 1984 and 1985. She worked on it for quite a while. There was a so-called Yom Kippur War with Egypt and Syria in 1973, but this poem is not about that time. It is about now. That is it for today. Enough of war, I hope. Soon we will be in the grip of another kind of war, which is less bloody maybe, but still determinative. And that is the coming election next year. Perhaps we will still find some poetry lurking in those cracks. Goodbye and good luck.